Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast in association with eBay Motors Group. It is Saturday the 6th of February and you're joined by myself, Philip Nothard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson. This is episode 401 of Motor Trade Radio, bringing you all the chatter that matters. And once again, we've gathered together this week's big industry stories for you to enjoy all in one place.
So, I mean, we've got a couple of shout-outs to begin with, but we've got a raft of headlines again, and the new car figures have come out again this week, haven't they? But we should really start off with the first shout-out, which is to our good old friend Dale Wyatt from Suzuki, who we've had on the show a few times, haven't we? And you spotted this, because I commented on it on LinkedIn, but... a great response for what he did.
Yeah, this really did catch my eye because it was Dale talking about having a lockdown wobble, and he went on to LinkedIn to share it. And I think we've probably all had at some stage lockdown wobbles, but to actually go public on it, I thought it was very brave, very transparent, and very good humoured as well, because he said on LinkedIn, I hit the COVID lockdown wall this week and spent most of this week interfering, frustrating and cajoling. Eventually my management team decided enough was enough and nominated a spokesman to say to me, and I'll paraphrase this: "Boss, please stop doing our job and do yours. We need clarity around the big picture. You do the objective and strategy stuff and we'll do the tactics. Consider me told." Which is just absolutely brilliant. And as you say, he had a lot of response on LinkedIn, a lot of likes, a lot of shares, and well done, Dale,
and
sharing that.
And I mean, well done to his management team actually to step up and to say something. I think that's takes a bit to do that in many ways, but at the end of the day, sometimes you do have to do these things, don't you? That's put him in his place, tell him what he needs to be doing, and let them get on with what they need to do. So, again, great guest as well. He's been on the show a few times, Anthony Dale. He's always good value on the show.
He is indeed, and we've also got a shout out for the Darren Martin interview that we did last week, because that's had a lot of attention on social media. It's still available, so do head over to the podcast for that. It'll be online, so and it's available for you to listen to, and it's worth revisiting because Darren's not just talking about January, but also likely trends over the quarter, and goes into why he's feeling sort of reasonably positive about the way the market and prices could perform. Yeah,
definitely worth a listen. And we've got a shout out for an interview that we've got coming in the week. So it's planned to be aired on Wednesday of the coming week. And that's with Steve Labasse, who is part of the BDO business, which we've mentioned a few times, haven't we, on the podcast?
We have indeed, yeah. And Steve's going to join us and talk about the Motor 150 report, which for listeners who are unfamiliar with it, it's a really good bit of research, because what BDO does every year is it takes the cumulative results of the top 150 franchise groups and treats them as a single entity and compares year on year. But what's particularly interesting about this year's report is that Steve and the team there are looking at some of the indicative trends to watch out for in 2021. So as you say, Phil, that will be live from Wednesday, so do watch out for that.
Definitely. So, do you want to run through some of the headlines that we're going to be talking about this week then, Curtis? And then we'll the big one with the new car figures.
Yeah, so lots to get through this week. We've got the new car and van regs for January. One's up, one's down.
Trust Let you guess which one that one is.
Yeah. Well, I'm just about to give it away anyway, because we'll follow that with Trust Ford's booming van sales. So we'll have a look to see what's powering that. Fleet demand for EVs soar. This is a particularly interesting one because it does single out battery electric vehicles in terms of experience huge growth in the fleet sector at the moment, over and above plug-in hybrids. And talking of electric, the Tesla boss advises customers not to buy when production is being ramped up. So PR man's nightmare, this one, but the boss of Tesla is saying when you shouldn't be buying their cars. We also look at revenge buying. Is it making a comeback, especially for used supercars? And finally, this week, we go back to the future. So cue here for your flying car.
Yes, definitely. So, as you say, Curtis, obviously the SMMT figures that a little bit more of a deeper dive from AM Online this week on it, because they've kind of looked at the January results for the new cars, but actually pulled out at the same time the forecasts, because the SMMT, as planned in January of this year, they've revised their 2021 and 2022 forecast for the cars and the CV market. So I don't know what you thought about the new car results, that were down 39.5% to just over 90,000 registrations in the month of January compared to last year.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, no big surprise here. The market, bearing in mind, showrooms were closed throughout January because of the lockdown, so showrooms were operating purely on click and collect. So as you say, the market was down 39.5%. So there were registrations totaled 90,249, and that's down on 149,278 in January last year. And the SMMT pointed out it's actually the worst start to a year since 1970. Now, within those figures, private registrations were down 38.5%. Fleet was down 39.7%, and business down 56%.
And I mean, I think, obviously I look at the international global market for registrations, particularly in Europe, and it's kind of an interesting story when you look at the UK at 39.5%, as you say there, but Germany figures came out at 31.1%. Spain have had a terrible time over there at 51.5% registration down in Spain, with only 42,000 registrations happening over in Spain. Italy, not too bad at 14% down, and France, probably the best out of there. It's only a 5.8% decline in registrations to finish on 126,400 registrations. But I think we were talking before the show around the context now when we're looking at both month-on-month comparisons and year-on-year comparisons, because although in the UK we sort of started to feel the impact in the sector around the March time, in some of the European countries, they did start to feel the pandemic as early as January. So when you start looking at January comparisons to January of last year, and on a year-on-year basis, we need to remember that some of the European markets struggled last year, and others didn't. So again, starting to see some of the challenges when we're looking at some of the comparisons now in the market. But it's a shame really, because even in the UK, I mean, again, you and I were talking before the show that there isn't many winners to talk about. We normally talk about winners and losers, don't we, in terms of manufacturer, in terms of the results, but there isn't many winners to talk about this year, unfortunately.
No, there's only Porsche was up 44%, Smart was up 236%, and other imports, which regular listeners will know is largely Tesla, was up 57%, but everyone else in double-digit declines for the month. One of the figures that did stand out for me, and it's a theme we'll revisit on some of our other stories, but registrations for battery electric vehicles accounted for 6.9% of the market, Plug-in hybrids, 6.8% of the market. So that combined figure is 13.7%, which is actually greater than diesel, which was at 12.3%. So I think this is indicative of what we'll be seeing over the coming months this year.
Yeah, and like I say, I mean, the AM story does touch on the forecast, and there's been some interesting discussions since the SMMT forecasts have come out around what they're expecting for 2021 and 2022 based on the current restrictions that are in place, particularly as we get closer to March. They are forecasting for the car registrations for the full year now to be at 1.887 million registrations, down 4.3% compared to 2020, but up 15.7%. Sorry, but more significantly is their growth of that battery electric vehicles and the plug-in hybrid vehicles that they're looking at for 2021 and 2022. So they're expecting that plug-in electric vehicles will be up 75.8%, which is a significant movement there for 2021, and plug-in battery electric vehicles to be up 61.7%. So they are shouting a huge rise for those two fuel types.
Yeah, and you know what? During the week, I had a conversation with Nathan Tomlinson from Devonshire Motors, because I posted something on LinkedIn, and he said, well, when do you think battery electric vehicles will actually overtake diesel? So we're having a friendly wager on September, this September, because I said I reckon if we're back to some sort of normality, with the vaccination program kicking in and showrooms reopening, September plate change could be, I think, and it's a total guesstimate, but that could be the month.
Yeah, well, I mean, SMMT for diesel, I mean, the 323,000 last year, they're forecasting 309,000 for 2021 and 303,000 for 2022. But actually, when it comes to the battery electric and the plug-in hybrid, they're looking at 254,000 of the battery electric for 2022 and 156,000 for the plug-in hybrid. So again, those two, way take over that diesel volume by 2022 there. So again, we know it's coming, don't we, in terms of that full market.
Yeah, definitely. Now, moving on to van sales, which didn't get a lot of coverage, I must say. So we're taking this from the press release, but LCV sales in January were up 2%. So that saw 24,029 vehicles registered, and registrations. The growth was really driven by the larger vans, so those vans over 3.5 tons, which grew by 25.4%, as other segments experienced double-digit decline for the month.
Yeah, and sticking with the van market, the LCV sector, the story in motortrader.com this week is from Truss Ford, saying that the CV business is on fire with obviously the boom in home deliveries, and that again is creating a lot of conversation in the recent weeks around how long will this commercial vehicle boom continue, what will happen when the market starts to return, that you can go out and buy your groceries and pick them up and things like this, that what will be the demand for these home deliveries, and what will that impact will that have on the CV market. And there's again a lot of conversations taking place on that, but again Truss Ford are saying that they're having a fantastic time with CV at the minute.
Yeah, they are, and from memory, I'm pretty sure that Truss Ford are the biggest sellers of Ford commercials in the UK. And within the story, they say that new car sales for the group declined 40%, but as you say, that's being partly offset by huge demand for vans. And we know the reasons why with click and collect and home delivery, and it's just a matter of how long this demand will actually be sustained across the sector.
Yeah, and I mean the story does touch on some of the challenges, obviously around the Northern Ireland market of what was happening there with availability to get product into Northern Ireland. They're touching on the Financial Times that they reported VW production will be cut by 100,000 in the first quarter of this year, and that both Nissan and Honda have confirmed that they've also forced to cut production due to the microchip issue that is affecting a lot of the manufacturers in that global marketplace. So again, a lot to play out at the minute as we move through. But apart from that, we're still doing okay. Fleet is demand for EV, isn't it? I think now is being reported.
It is, yeah. So heading over to Fleet News, and the headline there is Fleet Demand for EVs Soar, says Fleet Alliance. Now, Fleet Alliance is one of the big fleet management companies. And this is really confirming what we've spoken about before on the podcast, that the growth that we are expecting for EVs, and talking about the pure EVs, will be driven by the fleet sector. So they've reported a surge in orders for these pure electric vehicles, BEVs, from company car drivers looking to take advantage of attractive tax rates, while also enhancing the green credentials of themselves and indeed their companies. So in the last 12 months, the business has seen a 214% increase in EV orders, and a rise of over 5,000% since the start of 2018. So this is where the demand is coming from.
Yeah, and again, I mean, they shout out some of the EV orders there in 2020. Obviously, you mentioned Tesla before, didn't you? With that, I mean, 40.1% for Tesla there, followed by the Kia Niro at 9.1%, Mercedes EQC at 8%, the Nissan Leaf 5.4%, and the Porsche Taycan at 4.7%. So I think Tesla Model 3 is out there in the lead by some way at the minute, isn't it?
And talking of Tesla, moving on to our next story, which is from the Times, and this caused a lot of interest when it was published, a lot of comment on social media. The headline really says it all. Want a Tesla? Wait until we can make them properly, says Elon Musk. So this is based on an interview that Elon Musk did with an analyst. And one of the questions was, when is the best time to buy a Tesla? And Elon Musk quite honestly says, when the car comes out, not when they're ramping up production, but after they've sorted out production. And it's cited within the story that with the Tesla 3, there were some paint job issues because production was being ramped up. The cars were being produced at a higher rate than before, and the paint was not being allowed to dry in time, and it was kind of learning on the hoof because it had never ramped up production that high before and didn't know the ramifications. So Elon Musk is advising, buy it before or after, but not during the ramp up in production, which, as I said at the beginning, must be a PR man's absolute nightmare if you're doing PR for Tesla and you've got the boss saying, hold back on buying the cars.
Phenomenal, isn't it? I mean, he describes it as what a bungled paint job is the worry there that he goes into. But again, he talks obviously a little bit around the production and the volume there. But as you say, I mean, he's not one for holding back what he thinks, is he? As we know, he's off the cuff there, and he says what he's thinking. And as you say, a PR man's nightmare, I suspect, on that one. But do you know what? It's been talked about, hasn't it? So is it a bad PR opportunity or not? I'm not so sure. Depends how you look at it.
He is the world's richest man now, so he's obviously doing something right.
Exactly.
So you're listening to All the Chatter That Matters on the Motor Trade Radio podcast brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the big car retailing headlines, and available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And as from this week, we're also on Amazon Music. So just ask Alexia to play us whenever you like.
Yeah, I've not tested that on yet, Curtis, but yeah,
it's worth doing, isn't it?
We'll try that one. So we're going over to Car Dealer, and an interesting interview here, and we're taking the online release, press release, but there is an interview as well, and this is with the Audi sales director Steve Catlin, who's told Car Dealer that he believes revenge buying could make a comeback. Is his view for the market. So I don't know what your thoughts on this one are, because it's there's a lot of people that believe that we won't see the pent up demand, the revenge buying, or whatever, however you describe it, that we saw in June on the back of the initial lockdown. But there is others that will see somewhat upturn in opportunities as people do return to the market.
Yeah, and you're right, and the key word is could. Yeah, we could see it. We don't know, and what will be absolutely critical is the position of showrooms in March. If they are reopened and operate as before, then maybe we will see it. But it's a big ask at the moment, and we just don't know.
No, and I think there is. I think there's you're looking at March order takes. There's various performances brand by brand in terms of what impact the click and collect restrictions is having on the March order bank for the franchise dealers. There's a lot of pressure on government at the minute, as we know on a daily basis, that when the sector can reopen or start to reopen, because it will be a staged process for the reopening. But again, depending on how late it'll be, as to what people will be able to do. If they can't go on holiday, then will they be focusing on changing the car? Possibly, because there's still going to be potential risk of holiday travel restrictions in place.
Yeah, and on the subject of March, Mike Hawes, the chief exec of the SMMT, when he was talking about January's figures, he did actually make the point that every day that showrooms can safely open will matter, especially with the critical month of March looming. So acknowledging the importance of lockdown restrictions at the moment, but also acknowledging the crucial role played by March and showrooms being allowed to open safely.
And I mean, on the subject of people not being able to go on holiday and spend their money on, as it's described, on Barbados holidays and cruises and things like that, the story in the Financial Times this week was of interest, with wealthy snap up second-hand supercars after holidays cancelled, and this has come out from interviews and updates from HR Owen around sort of what's been happening within their supercar sector, and that sales of under £150,000 rise as pandemic halts exotic trips, says luxury dealer HR Owen.
Yeah, it's a good story, this one. So prices of some used luxury models fell because of the pandemic, and HR Owen in this piece, in fact, it's an interview with Ken Chu, the chief exec, said they saw a significant rise in demand for used cars priced up to £150,000. And a direct quote from Ken Cho here is, people said, I cannot travel to the Bahamas, so I'll buy a used Ferrari or Lambo instead. So this is kind of the ultimate in revenge buying. Yeah, we were talking about revenge buying in the last story, and this was the HRO experience. Probably, I would have thought earlier last year, as we came out of that first lockdown.
Yeah, I mean, again, there is certain sectors, and I think on the interview with Darren Martin, not quite to the £150,000 bracket, but the conversation we had with Darren on last week's interview was that, that top end, the premium market seems to be still holding well, and maybe it is the type of customers that can a comfortable buying online, as Darren pointed out there, that are more comfortable to do that because of they can't go on holiday and can't do those more luxury things they may have done previously. So again, one that we'll see what happens next, and it's quite interesting because didn't we see a growth in the classic cars at one point as through the financial crash, wasn't there? As
Yes.
people started to invest their money in classic cars rather than the banks and such like. They were redirecting their funds and buying classic cars because they were going up and giving a better return on money than anything else at that time. So again, we'll see what happens with this one, won't we?
Yeah, and there was an interesting stat within the story with HRO saying that 90% of customers are ordering new cars without test driving them. So, although there's that strength in the used car market for HRO, and they are still selling new cars through click and collect.
Yeah, and as he describes those, do they need to drive a Lambo? I suppose it's one question, isn't it? That are they quite comfortable ordering that Lambo online, and that's it. Do they need to test drive it? Is a question at the minute, but yeah, we'll see. But moving on to the final, the and finally, and we were in a bit of a social chit chat on this one, or because it's a question, and it may be a question we posed Tom Callow on this week's VRA webinar, and maybe others in the market that. In the Automotive News Europe was the story that Hyundai partners with UK startup on urban air taxi infrastructure. Now, this poses a lot of questions around the current EV infrastructure that's in place and whether it will be in our lifetime that we will see air taxi happen and an infrastructure in place for air taxis. I don't know what your thought was on this one. I think our good old friend Mr. Billsborough didn't think we would be around to benefit from this when it did happen.
No, he didn't. And I had to check my calendar to make sure it wasn't April the 1st, because it just seems bizarre that we're talking about building an infrastructure for flying cars at a time when we haven't quite got the infrastructure in place for electric cars. But there you go. But the story does say that from November, visitors to Coventry will be able to see what a flying car airport looks like, and also see passenger carrying drones. So, I mean, that's that's something to look forward to, isn't it?
Yeah, the operational electric vertical takeoff and landing. Is abbreviated down to another eVTOL vehicle on the landing pad. So yeah, I mean it's been backed. I mean the UK government is backing and Hyundai Motor Group backing. We'll see if the realisation of this, but they are saying that is it Urban Airport founder and executive chairman Ricky Sandhu has said that it's on its way, and that there'll be a fully operational airport in the world in the UK. So that'll be an interesting one.
Yeah, and he does go on to say, and this had me scratching my head a bit, while there has been progress on developing flying cars, he said the infrastructure was the missing piece. But when was all this development on flying cars taking place?
And maybe I suspect the infrastructure is a key element.
Yep.
I was just saying that. I mean, that's obviously the key conversation in EVs at the minute is the supporting infrastructure for EV growth. But maybe if you want to be able to take off and land, that we'll need an infrastructure to support that. But do you know what? There's probably things around today that we were probably laughing at many years ago, weren't we? And they are here today, and it's been done. So again, we should never dismiss these kind of things. That and you know what? Let's hope it's within our lifetime, Curtis. Not sure it's going to be this November, but we'll see.
No, it certainly won't be in time for the March plate change. And of course, listeners tuning into to this podcast will probably be thinking about, wonder how we're going to be selling them. There's some opportunities out there.
There is. But that's it for this week. I mean, again, go back to the Darren Martin interview. Very, very apt interview there. Not just looking at the January results, but actually what to expect for the quarter and where Cap HPI see the market heading there for the quarter. Don't miss this week's interview with BDO. Very insightful. We've shared their stories and their insight and data on the podcast numerous times. So again, it should be a fantastic interview when we get that one done and out on Wednesday. So a busy week again, Curtis.
It is indeed, but that's all for this week. Thanks for joining us. You've been listening to the weekly Motor Trade Radio podcast, brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. Stay safe and well, and join Philip and I again next weekend for all the chatter that matters. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.